Welcome back to the channel, guys. Before you watch the podcast, make sure you smash that like button. Subscribe and ring the bell if you haven't already. Make sure you hit that notification bell to be notified on my future content. All my social medias can be found in the description of this video. That's my Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, my Rumble, and my GETTR. If you want to do me a massive favor, jump over to my Rumble and GETTR. They are free speech platforms. GETTR is equivalent to Twitter and Rumble is equivalent to YouTube. It's all free, guys, so jump over there using the links in the description. Subscribe to my Rumble and follow me on GETTR. All free and completely uncensored. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. And remember, all my guests, all their links, their YouTubes, their books, whatever it is, the links can be found in the description also. So if you want to go and follow them, use the links in the description. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. Enjoy the podcast and peace.
It's trending on Twitter right now. I won't repeat what he said, but he made an inappropriate joke, and it went viral. And then he did an apology, which made things worse, which went viral. And now all of his major sponsors have just dropped him in the last 24 hours. We're trying to arrange a sit down with him and some feminist dominatrix friends of mine.
That should go pretty well. That's. I wish you nothing but the best with that, Shaun. I mean, you'll be sitting there in absolute. People will tune in to see that one, but I've never actually. I know that he spent time with Jordan Peterson's daughter. He spent time with Jordan Peterson. In my opinion, I agree with a lot of things that Andrew Tate talks about and says, but I do think that he's looking for that sort of drama, and he knows that these things will gain traction if he says these things. It's like Jordan Peterson says stuff not for the clout, he says it because he believes it. That's a question that I have for you, Wildman. So Wildman, we'll move on to Wildman, because
if I was in a jail anywhere in the world and Wildman was with me, I'm not a tough guy. I mean, look at me. I'm a business studies graduate. And his fists were twice as big as mine. We just posted a clip today on the channel whereby he's talking about he punched someone. He's got this tooth stuck in between two of his knuckles. It was a stupid thing to do. It was exacerbated by advice I was given that made things worse. I won't get into that because I'm being threatened with lawsuits over that. And it was a life lesson for me. I did apologize to the people who were offended at the time.
it's an absolute pleasure to get you on the show, mate. How are you doing? How are you keeping?
Yeah, good, man. My head's just spinning with all the stuff that's happened to True Geordie this week. And he's had my back, for many years. He launched me onto massive subscriber base. Basically, I had a few subscribers before I went on his channel, and it's just heartbreaking to see what he's going through. I'm not condoning what he said, which is he shouldn't have said it. It was emotionally immature. It was offensive. I completely understand the reaction to it, but to see everything melt down for him in front of my eyes, it's heartbreaking.
Are you talking about his recent things to do with Tyson Fury?
No, the Islamophobic thing. I don't know if you've seen it, but
I didn't even hear what happened.
It's trending on Twitter right now. I won't repeat what he said, but he made an inappropriate joke, and it went viral. And then he did an apology, which made things worse, which went viral. And now all of his major sponsors have just dropped him in the last 24 hours.
Wow, I did not know that. I have been off Twitter for quite a while now. I should have actually jumped on since Elon's took over it, but I didn't know that. I just seen the one with Tyson Fury. I reacted to that on my other channel. True Geordie, though, he's been in the spotlight for the past couple of weeks in regards to Andrew Tate, and now the sort of is it Islamophobic sort of remarks. Was it took out of context, or was it a serious quote from himself?
So he was on a live stream, I think on Twitch, and someone asked him about Andrew Tate, And when people get in that podcast wars frame of mind, I think a different part of the brain takes over, and you lose your ability to think rationally. And he said something completely inappropriate at Muslims in general, which was way out of character for him, and he's suffering a hell of a price right now.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I would need to sort of be a wee bit informed to actually speak on this. I don't know what he said. I don't know the direct quotes that he said, but we've got into this stage now on media. Doesn't matter if it's YouTube, mainstream media. It doesn't make a difference. What you say can be held against you at all times. So, I mean, he said something. He's apologized for it. I mean, he didn't murder anybody. He's not. He's not a bad guy. We do make mistakes. We will say things. You know, we'll go through bad periods of our life. But what I do feel is this, has he been baited in from Andrew Tate? And I'll actually ask you that question. I've got this question down for you. What is your opinion on Andrew Tate?
So Andrew Tate is a character out of the 48 Laws of Power. He's read Machiavelli. He's read The Art of War. He's got that killer instinct look in his eyes. He's a trained fighter. Paddy the Baddie recently said, beware of anyone who can fight with their legs and feet. And he's a dangerous person to challenge. It was, one of the Robert Greene laws is pick your battles carefully. And I think True Geordie bit off more than he could chew going up against Andrew Tate, because he's one of the most influential people in social media. He's got an army of testosterone-fueled young men behind him, and he's got an extremely sharp mind. So it wasn't a good one to go up against, but there's always this temptation, isn't there, when someone is that big, to clickbait them?
He's got an extremely sharp mind, you're correct. And we're not here to talk about Andrew Tate, we're here to talk about you. But just on the Andrew Tate thing, people always come at the angle with him from religion. If he starts something new like religion, they never actually try to criticize him for the things that can be criticized, like his views on women. Yeah, you get a few people coming on with pink hair, and maybe they're like sort of like the woke people would come on and try to criticize it, but they always fall into the traps. But I'm yet to see him actually sit down with a critical thinker that can turn around and say, well, hold on, why would you take $8,000 on your wife if she was an OnlyFans girl, if she was making 10? These are absolutely crazy things that he's coming out with.
Well, we're trying to arrange a sit down with him and some feminist dominatrix friends of mine.
That should go pretty well. That's I wish you nothing but the best with that, Shaun. I mean, you'll be sitting there in absolute. People will tune in to see that one, but I've never actually, I know that he spent time with Jordan Peterson's daughter. He spent time with Jordan Peterson. In my opinion, I agree with a lot of things that Andrew Tate talks about and says, but I do think that he's looking for that sort of drama, and he knows that these things will gain traction if he says these things. It's like Jordan Peterson says stuff not for the clout, he says it because he believes it. I would struggle to believe if Andrew Tate actually believes half of what he says. That's where I come from in this. And for True Geordie to be baited into this, I think that I like True Geordie, I watch all the stuff, but I think True Geordie has been baited into this situation as an easy target.
That is a distinct possibility. And Tate, he's definitely a calculating person, and I don't believe most of what he says he believes. I think it's an act. In that law court controversy at all costs, he's said things that have gone over community guidelines on major platforms, but I think he did it strategically to launch his brand and what he's doing and to become one of the most famous online people in the world, which is what he's achieved.
He's achieved it, Shaun, but he's achieved it with great loss too, because now they've took away his ability to bank, his ability to sort of even start a PayPal, his ability to run an Instagram, his ability, the things that make him money apart from the OnlyFans and the casinos that he has in Romania, which is, I mean, that alone in itself is crazy. But he can't actually, he's on GETTR and he's on Rumble, but until those platforms go viral themselves, he relies on people like yourself and people like me, I've got a very small channel, to sort of keep his notoriety going, with the clips, he's the master of those 15-second clips. And as you say, it's testosterone fueled young men that are looking up for a daddy figure that maybe aren't getting that today. That look at the Jordan Petersons, they look at the Andrew Tates, the Weinsteins, and the people like that. That they're not getting that in home life. So then there's these guys that are coming in through the ranks, and it's like it's just open playing field for anything. This guy's making big bank now, and was making big bank prior to all this. How do you think Andrew Tate recovers from this type of cancellation?
I think it's a financial equation. So he's just looked at what he's lost from, blowing up on certain platforms that have cancelled him. But the momentum he's got, the money he's making from his courses or whatever it is he's selling, is probably offsetting what he's lost on these other platforms. I think he doesn't give a shit. He's got it made. He's making so much money. It's probably irrelevant to him. He views these platforms as old world censorship media versus going on Rumble or somewhere that's uncensored, and he sees the potential in that.
100%, but and people need to realize too. They see these public figures like Andrew Tate, and they think this is what the epitome of a millionaire is. If you actually look into who owns the planet, I was looking into it recently. There's a company called BlackRock, and they have everything. They own the planet. I don't know if you know them. You probably do.
I do, yes.
And they have a percentage in absolutely everything on planet Earth. If you look up Disney, and that's where the real money is. That's where the power is. It's not these guys that are on, the 15-second reels. It's the people that have shares in everything, and they own. You can look up anything, and BlackRock owns a percentage of that. Like,
these are the kind of companies that own interest in music videos, putting out songs saying kill cops, deal drugs, go to prison. And on the other hand, they've got investments in the private prison businesses so that they profit from both sides.
It's absolutely crazy. And listen, I don't hate the players. Just make me a part of the game. That's all I'm saying. Just make me a part of the game. Have it where anybody can get in. Okay, there might be a million hurdles, but just make me a part of the game, because everybody's bitching these days about this, that, and the other, socialism, communism, capitalism. Listen, in my opinion, let people play the game. If you fail, you fail. But if you win, you win, and then it's an even playing field for everybody. I want to get your opinion on drug laws. So drug laws here, I know you're sort of an advocate to legalize certain drugs and get the tax money and pump that maybe into mental health and things like that. Do you generally believe that legalizing some drugs will help in the war on drugs?
So I've done 2 talks at the Oxford Union. I did one about 5 years ago, and I did one about 2 weeks ago. And I was on the legalization side of the debate. It's like a House of Commons style debate set up. And this one that we just did, we won the vote 100 plus to 50 something. So I've seen the shift now in the attitude of the young people of this country. Basically, I'm campaigning for an end to the war on drugs, an end to mass incarceration, to take all that money that they will save from doing that, to go after the predators, and to use some of it to educate young people. So more education for young people and less incarceration. Because if you look at the numbers, the most dealt drug in the world is weed. And they estimate that the black market in all drugs right now, created by drug laws, approaches $1 trillion a year. Gets bigger every year, gets more prolific every year, gets cheaper every year, more violent every year. I interviewed a psychiatrist out of Canada, and he said, I wish we could go back to the good old days of heroin due to the fentanyl explosion where he was based, killing all these people. So the bottom line is, having wrote 5 books about Pablo Escobar, I learned that he could source a kilo of coca paste out of Peru or Bolivia for $60. This is in the 70s when he was getting started. Due to the drug market price created by laws, the black market price, he could sell a kilo of cocaine for $60,000. Milton Friedman, the senior economist in the world at that time, wrote to George H.W. Bush and said, here's what's going to happen. This is the biggest economic incentive in the history of the world for organized crime to flood the entire world with drugs. And it gets even worse because there's also an economic incentive to be the most violent. Whichever is the most violent mafia or cartel will dominate the market and maximize their profits. So you look at the old school Italian mafia guys, like Francis, some of the other people I've interviewed, they don't harm women or kids. These days, the cartels will kidnap your entire family, torture them slowly, film it, and put it online. So the politicians know prohibition doesn't work. They know that from alcohol prohibition. Al Capone took over with his machine gun crew. The concentrate of the liquor increased, crime increased around it. And they know the same thing has happened with drugs, but they're not stopping it because they've learned to profit from it. You got 1 in 100 adults in America right now in prison. Non-violent drug offenders are prolific. Women didn't go to prison hardly before mass incarceration and drug laws. It was women that became the fastest growing prison population. It was Bill Clinton put hundreds of thousands of non-violent drug offenders in prison, which is contradictory considering his half-brother Roger got busted purchasing, and he said to the undercover cop, Bill's got a nose like a vacuum cleaner. So the utter hypocrisy of these psychopathic leaders who've orchestrated this makes me sick. And being in the system and seeing that prisoners aren't all pedophiles, serial killers, rapists. The average arrest when I was in there was a black kid or a Mexican kid with a bit of weed getting like a 2 to 5 year sentence. And I'm starting thinking, what is going on here? But when you find out that the private prisons get $60,000 per year per person, and the prisons allow it to be drug and gang infested mayhem, they give them $50 on the gates, they have a nice day when they get released. As soon as they come back, it's another $60,000 a year per person. Contracts in the tens of billions, and the political contributions are in the tens of millions. All political parties to keep that rolling out. UK now proudly is the highest incarceration rate in Europe because we're following the American model instead of following the bloody Scandinavians who've got the lowest reoffending in the world. But that doesn't keep you as a client for life if you rehabilitate someone, does it? It's absolutely sickening. And that, this is how my whole activism came about, was the conditions in Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail, asking a guard how they got away with the dead rats in the food, the cockroaches crawling over us at night, the guards murdering mentally ill prisoners. And the guard said to me, the world doesn't give a shit about prisoners. And, they have no idea what's going on in here. So this was back in 2004. A little pencil sharpener on my cell door. I started to write everything down. My aunt smuggled it out of the maximum security Madison Street jail. And it was the first prison blog. And people can even go back and read those journal entries. It's under John, Jons, John's Jail Journal. So my journey through the Arizona penal system was documented like real time in these blog entries. And that, prior to that, I was a party person, selfish, narcissistic, hedonistic, just thinking about getting high, getting my friends high. And in that second year in the jail, when I was facing 200 years and I was suicidal and they stopped my girlfriend from visiting me, it kind of crushed that English Shaun person out of me. And I started to think about the needs of other people, helping the fellas read their legal paperwork, started a class for the Mexicans so they could write home in Spanish. And on it went. And that's just launched my life in this completely new direction. The YouTube channel was started in 2007. And looking back now, that's the first ever prison YouTube channel as well. So
yeah, and there's another question I've never actually heard anybody ask you before. People know your story. You're massive on YouTube. You've got millions of views on YouTube just with your story alone on multiple different channels. But one question somebody has never asked you: do you think that you could do the same in a UK or Irish prison?
So, if I could do the same, do you mean the activism?
No, I mean, have you done the same thing in England and then went to jail for that, went to prison for that? Because I did check out your story because before we actually recorded this, I sort of told Shaun, like, I spoke to people in America that I know from Chicago. They notified me that Arizona is very much like this, but the prisons maybe in Buffalo to Chicago to LA, all of them are all different, but they are very heavily gang affiliated, the ones that you went to. So, your story 100, listen, as you say, you've got the documents online to sort of prove that this did happen to you. So for the people that are saying that your story's fake, and I know there's lots of these people, a story checks out 100%. But what I'm trying to say is that if you done the exact same thing in England and you went to jail in England, what do you think would be the main differences, and do you think you would have came out the same way?
So I've spoke to the fellas in the English prisons. I'm scheduled to speak at some prisons later this month. And when I do my talking there, one guard told me it was the first time the prisoners went back to their cells and didn't complain about anything. So Arizona prides itself on being the most draconian. The sheriff, Joe Arpaio, claimed he was America's toughest sheriff. And the moldy food, it cost him 50 cents or less per day to feed each prisoner, the rotten food. And his police dogs, it cost him more to feed his police dogs, and they were working for a living. So this was an extreme environment. And they did actually send, I don't know if it's still on YouTube, they sent some housing estate thugs, some young lads from this country, to Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail. There was a documentary made about it, and they only lasted a couple of days. You might be able to Google that and find it. Maybe put a clip into this or something.
Yeah. If I find the link for that, I will post the link for that in the description. Go and watch that, guys. The reason why I asked it, because there's a lot of people that wanted to know that. They want to see your reaction to that. And what I can say is there is a I don't know how credible this is, but there's a Facebook group I joined, and it's sort of ex-prisoners from around the same area, and they're all in that group, and they talk about they want to kill you. They don't care if you're dead. Violence is very, very high. So I know that there's big violence here in Ireland, in the Irish prisons, and in England. But the mind frame to be in that situation as a complete foreigner in a country, in a place packed with people, of all different cultures. There's Mexicans. There's what's the other ones? There's the Chicanos. They are like Mexican Americans, aren't they?
Correct, yes. So the four major gangs is the whites, the Aryan Brotherhood. Blacks is the Mau Mau. You've got the Mexican Americans, the Chicanos, and then you've got the Paisas, who are the Mexican nationals. And to a degree, you've also got Native Americans as well. But I'd say that the Mexicans and the Mexican Americans formed more than half the population. The whites were probably about a quarter. Blacks, I think, about 10%. And then other, the remainder. That's how it was in Arizona. But every state's like a different country. Yeah. Every state's got its own different mix. Every state's got different laws, different gang rules. So comparing, for example, Florida to Arizona is like comparing Turkey to France.
Well, that's the thing people don't realize, is because we live in such a small country, even Ireland to England, the UK and Ireland itself, it's so small compared to America. These are massive places, like Australia, they're massive places. There's so it's like the Asian side of Russia to the European side of Russia. It's complete two different cultures. So, as you say, New York to LA, two completely different places. And yeah, I could just imagine what it was like, and with all those cultures, with those gang rules. Now, one thing
don't forget, Ronan, who I got arrested with.
Wildman. That's a question that I have for you. Wildman. So Wildman, we'll move on to Wildman, because
if I was in a jail anywhere in the world and Wildman was with me, I'm not a tough guy. I mean, look at me. I'm a business studies graduate. And his fists were twice as big as mine. We just posted a clip today on the channel whereby he's talking about he punched someone. He's got this tooth stuck in between two of his knuckles. He punched the guy so hard. He goes to the hospital. And he's in an argument with the nurse over it. It's so funny what he says.
Wildman was and still is a character, because his memory lives on on the videos that you've posted, that True Geordie has in his channel. So his memory lives on. And I love watching Wildman. Wildman was before I came on YouTube myself, I was a fan of yours. I was a fan of James English. I was a fan of all the different podcasters. I still am a fan. But Wildman was a guy that if you seen a video drop with Wildman, you were going to get brutal, honest truth, craziness. It was going to be funny. and he's definitely not politically correct, but he could get away with it because he's wild man. Now, I want to keep it at the high spirits because I don't want to depress you. I don't want to bring any emotions on. But how crucial was it for you to have Wildman along your side in America, and how crucial was it for your early career on YouTube to have Wildman by your side?
All right, so going into the jail then, we were in a van. So we were arrested in different groups of co-defendants. There were so many of us. I think the first group was about 13 people, and half of those were women. So we're all in the van, men and women, and we pull in at the Madison Street Jail, the Horseshoe, and all the new arrestees are outside. And the women get out first. So the new arrestees are like gangbangers, drunks, people on meth, people who've been in fights with the cops, people high on various drugs, people who've been tasered. It's just madness. It's one of the craziest parts of the whole journey. So they see this van pull up, and all the men in the line just turn around, and they see our women get off, and Wildman's just watching this. And Wild Woman gets off, and these fellas start shouting like, get your tits out and things like that. Probably in the local language, obscenities. So Wildman's eyebrow just cranks up. Just looks from his face just remains completely calm, but his eyebrow just cranks up. And whenever his eyebrow cranks up, he's got these red dots in his head telling him to hurt people. That's kicking in. So you can actually see his mugshot. I'll have to send it to you. He's got a Vikings beard at this point in time. He's in the black and white. No, we're not got the black and white on yet, but he's got this Vikings beard. He's been up for days on crack and meth. He's all handcuffed up. And the guard yells at him to get off the top step. And he just puts his head back like that and refuses to get off the top step and stirs at all the fellas yelling at the women. And he's like, "You lot disrespecting our women. I'm going to be in that building with you all in a minute. I'll have fucking any of yous if you don't shut up right now." And then his eyes just go completely blooded and crazy. And then he just goes, "If you think I won't." And when he laughed like that, bear in mind, he was 29.5 stone when he died. It was like a vibrational frequency would come off him that you could just feel.
He's letting them know, I'm not doing time with you. You're doing time with me.
Absolutely.
That's the message that he's let. And the one thing I have to ask you, the Aryan Brotherhood, he became a member of the Aryan Brotherhood because he had to, essentially, because that's how you got on in prison. Does the Aryan Brotherhood use the little shamrock, the green shamrock, as their symbol?
All right, let me rephrase what you just said. And we have just interviewed Michael Thompson. We've got parts 4 and 5 of him this week. We've interviewed him 3 times. He's been the biggest thing on the channel this year, over 2 million views. And we asked him about the tattoos, and he told us the complete history of the shamrock and the brand and how the Nazi stuff came in. So people might want to watch that for the exact words, because I don't want to say anything that's going to be not precise. So
No, I will watch that one, Shaun, 100%. It's just the reason why I ask you that is because if you come to Ireland, the shamrock, the tricolour, we are completely the opposite of, connected to any type of Nazism, neo-Nazism, or anything like that. There's quite a liberal place, quite a sort of a diverse place, Ireland. It's been heading that way, for years, and I think it's probably one of the most diverse places in the world. But the fact that the Aryan Brotherhood I have seen a few symbols. I'm not quoting you in this now, but I have seen a few symbols where they were using the shamrock and certain Irish symbols. I thought that's quite strange. Maybe it's because it's a white thing. I don't know, but it's crazy. That's quite the cultures are so crazy when they mix.
And I've seen that tattoo firsthand. Now, the other thing you said was that Wildman was a member of the Aryan Brotherhood. So Wildman, he knocked out the guy who was running his building, and he ended up with that guy's job. And then over the years, he put so much work in for the Aryan Brotherhood, maintaining that job, keeping the youngsters in check, doing the hooch, doing the gambling. He maintained that for so many years for the AB that they offered him the patch, which is membership. But he said that he wasn't a Nazi, and his grandfather fought Hitler, and told him he didn't want it, because that's how he is. He's just upfront with everybody. He was offered the membership, but he did not accept it.
Well, that's it's good to know that, because I was always looking at Wildman and thinking to myself, he doesn't care what race he's around. But I suppose if you're put in that situation in prison, right? I'm not saying that you were a member of it, but I'm trying to put myself in that situation. You're thinking to yourself, I have to survive here. If I don't, look, maybe I'm not a big guy, maybe I'm not as intelligent as you, maybe I don't have the notoriety of Wildman. So how do I survive? I don't want to be a bitch. That's another one. You don't want to be a prison bitch. So I'm going to maybe become that's what you call a torpedo for the Aryan Brotherhood. Earn my stripes to survive, and hopefully I can do my time and get through this without being harmed. And that's a reality for a lot of young men going into prisons over in America, that they do that. They go in and they don't have a choice. How important do you think your education and your intelligence come into survival in prison?
All right, so I was in Towers Jail for a year, medium security. Then they doubled my bail bond to 1.5 million and moved me over to maximum security. So I'm thinking, right, going into max, these guys are going to have far more serious convictions than medium security. In the end, they were mostly in there for murder, beefs. And I need to now act like I know what the fuck I'm doing. I've got the prison walk, I've got the slang. And this is a serious situation, because when someone's new, they're judging you right away. They've got this very street, smart, animalistic instinct. It's like X-ray vision. They could see right through you. So in my black and white stripes, I arrive. My cellmate, he's asleep. So I walk over during the prison walk over to the whites table. And these are serious, tatted skinhead guys. And I'm throwing out the slang. Hey, what up, Wood? That's like, how you doing, mate? It's like, what up, Wood?
Did you put on the accent?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was. I said it in an English way though, because I also played my English card everywhere I went. So I had the slang, but it would be like in an English accent, and my voice would be a little bit deeper than it is now. I think I've been up in transportation all night, which hadn't actually deepened my voice anyway. So I'm like, what up, Wood? And they're like, where are you rolling from, Wood? And I'm like, Towers. And then, they just started asking me about my bail. I said my bail got doubled to 1.5 million. So they made me max. And then he's like, what are you in for? And I tell him about raves and ecstasy and stuff like that. And he says to me, there's only 4 seats at the table, and the table's already crowded. So he says that, I can stand there and talk to them, and I have a conversation with them, and then I go back to my cell. So in my cell now, internally, I'm shitting myself and thinking, my life is in these guys' hands, because I've seen so much violence. I've seen what they do to people that they don't accept. They're making a decision right now as to whether to accept me or to smash me, because if they're going to get rid of you, they smash you. And so Bullet, the head of the whites at that time, he comes down to my cell with all of his legal paperwork. So he's seen right through my convict act that I'm an educated person, because to him, he's looking at, how can this person be a resource to me? He's not a tough guy. I'm not going to send him in to fight anyone. This is an educated person. I can't read and write. I've got all this fucking legal paperwork sat in my cell. Bam! I'm going to give it to him. It's going to take him hours to read it, but he's going to sure as hell going to do it. Otherwise, he's going to get smashed. So that's what happened. I read his legal paperwork, told him my perspective. He liked me. He started to tell me a lot of stories about people he'd murdered and stabbed, and the law rolling people up in carpets and all this kind of stuff. And I was fine there for a bit until things changed. And I started to teach the Mexicans how to write home in Spanish. So in this particular pod, there was 10 whites, 10 blacks, and 10 Mexicans. And one of the Mexicans was a midget. And they were all in for murder. So I was going upstairs teaching the Mexicans this, how to write home letters in Spanish, because I'd done courses in Spanish at a college in Scottsdale before my incarceration. A lot of them worked out in the countryside, didn't know how to read and write, things like that. So these classes were ongoing. And then the AB had a problem with me helping another race. I was a race traitor now because this was violating the rules of racial division. But I had a cellmate at the time. I think we call him Joe in Hard Time, my book about all this. And he was a crystal meth chemist who was working with the AB on the streets, supplying them. So he intervened, and I got the green light back to keep helping the Mexicans. He did end up falling out with some of the whites, and there was a fight, but that was a separate beef. That was.
How rare is that though, Shaun? Because I'm listening to a few stories from different people, and that they're saying once you're considered a race traitor, that's a very hard thing to sort of to get over with a lot of these gangs. It can. It's quite possible with yourself. You know, you are an educated guy. You're an asset to these people. You know, as you say, that they're considering you an asset. There's a lot of things that these people can't do. They can maybe sell drugs. They're maybe very street smart. But when it comes to actual, like, writing a letter, working out certain things, you know, they need you. So do you think that played a pivotal role in certain situations like that, where they just maybe we'll give them a pass on this one?
They gave me a pass because of my cellmate's relationship with the AB, which overrode the troublemakers that were labeling me as a race traitor.
Right.
Now, everyone's off their head on drugs all the time in these places.
What drugs? What type of drugs?
Heroin and crystal meth primarily. I mean, some of the houses I was in, up to 90% were injecting heroin, and 2/3 had hepatitis C. It's really sad. So bear in mind, the rules that are enforced by the gang are not fixed. They are fluctuating dependent upon who is in control of the gang and who the other whites are present, what their attitude towards it. I'll give you an example, right? So I was back in medium security Towers jail, and you've got 45-man pod here, 45-man pod here, 45-man pod here, 45-man pod here, and a guard tower in the middle with a glass bubble at the top with 2 guards in it, looking down on all these guys. And in an opposite pod at the back, it's like 2 tiers of cells, and then the stairs running down in the middle. So at night, when the guards weren't paying much attention, there started to be a fellatio show coming from one of the opposite pods, whereby a white guy was getting a blowjob from a Native American trans prisoner. So every night, the fellas would look out their cells, and there'd be this dark, humorous, running commentary on what was going on, which was crude, but you know, because it's such a bleak situation, anything you can find humor in, it kind of like alleviates the tension. So anyway, this is going on night after night, and more people are joining in with these barrages of saying these crude things. Then all of a sudden, a guy arrives from Buckeye Prison who's a shot caller from that yard, and he took complete control of the building. And that show that was running every night, the fellatio show, he sent word over to that building that that guy was being a race traitor, and it was inappropriate for the Woods to be behaving like that. And if it didn't stop immediately, he was going to get smashed, and it stopped immediately. So the rules, there are certain rules, but it depends on the attitude of who's in charge. There was also a time when the Italian mafia took over from the Aryan Brotherhood in my building. My building is just a tiny little minuscule fraction of the Arizona penal system, which has got 60,000 people in it. So this is not the Italian mafia taking over the whole
You were in the pods, weren't you? You were in like the pod system. I've seen them. It's like a pod, and you have you've got a stairs. You've got the stairs up, and then there's the rooms down, and then you've got the sort of the steel tables in the middle. Is that the type of setting it was?
Correct, yes. You got the octagonal steel tables bolted to the floor, metal grid stairs running up the middle with the pink socks wrapped around them so the guys can do the pull-ups, and then 2 tiers of cells. So those cells were designed for one person, but they got 3 people in each cell, 15 cells, and a shower on the end. So you got 45 men in an area designed for 15, which is also why tension was very high. But there was a time when the Italian mafia took over the building. It was my favorite experience in the jail system in which I was in for 26 months, was when they did so, because they hated the racism. And it just became like, if people read that chapter in my book, Little Italy, it's people doing backflips off the tables, and it was just like a fun thing.
I think you quoted. I heard you quote something before that. Was that Two Tonys? That was the time of Two Tonys, wasn't it?
No, that's later.
That's
The guy running the Italian mafia in this building, he was out at night with the guards smoking, giving them orders while we were all locked down. He knew when we were going to get raided. He told us. When we got raided, he'd have guards bring all clean towels and clothes back to us. And he moved co-defendants into my cell, which is the best possible thing in the world. He tried to move Wildman into my cell, but the prosecutor had a do not house together on us. So we had the guards bring Wildman into our pod day after day after day and just sit with us. It was amazing.
Wow,
and the enforcer for Little Italy was a guy called Bruno. Bruno just saw my Banged Up Abroad episode in America last year, contacted me. I'd not seen him for 20 years. This is 2002. And now I've interviewed Bruno 5 times on my channel. He's become my co-host when I'm interviewing gangster characters out of America online.
That's crazy how things are ran like that. Now, do you attribute that type of lifestyle in prison to it doesn't seem like to be a very violent time. It seems to be that there's control, there's like an ecosystem, and is that money being paid to the guards? Is that a hierarchy sort of having control?
Yeah, the guards have been corrupted by his family's money.
If I don't do this, my family are going to get shot. Or is that just, what's better? Would you rather it be ran by the Italian mafia or the AB?
The Italian mafia was the best time. And I just look back on it with pleasure, because they would come to my cell every night. I had a cellmate, right? It was a co-defendant called Joey Crack. He was a feisty New York Italian, tall guy, lean. He had the face of an Afghan hound. On the street, he was like a walking drug testing kit. So say we were out somewhere and someone had some cocaine, he'd be like, he'd test it. He'd just put it in a needle and slam it into his neck. That was Joey Crack. He just didn't give an F. And he was such a charismatic speaker. So every night, Little Italy are filing into my cell, and Joey Crack's just telling endless Wildman stories. Sadly, Joey Crack died quite young when he got released from this incarceration, actually, years ago. But I documented a lot of the stories he told me. So we finally arranged for Little Italy to meet Wildman at Catholic Mass.
You remember that story? I remember that story. Yeah, I remember you saying that story. And the thing about it is, Wildman, where you had the same experiences, you were split up for a vast majority of the time too, weren't you?
So right away, the prosecutor put a do not house together on us. So I ended up, after the horseshoe, I ended up in Tower 6, Towers Jail, and Wildman ended up, I think, in Tower 2, Towers Jail. But word quickly spread that this group of co-defendants was in the system. And as more groups were arrested, I think the second group was dozens, more and more of us were filling the jail up, and we became one of the biggest groups in the jail. So that's why Little Italy allied itself with us, because there were situations that Wildman and other of my bouncers had their back in. And I just feel really grateful that they accepted me, because the day they invited me to work out with them was the day I knew they'd accepted me, and it was a good thing. Yeah,
it's you seem to have, where you've had negative experiences about prison, you actually seem to have learned a lot in prison from all the different characters, and that's essentially, okay, the gang thing's not good, the threat of being raped, the drugs, it's probably hard to live around, but the characters that you meet in prison when you've got out and you're here now, I mean, the stories that you have, they're for YouTube, they're fantastic to listen to, and I mean, without that experience, I mean, you wouldn't be here. Do you know what I mean? You might be here in a different way, but you wouldn't have these abundance of stories to say for us to hear. It's crazy. Some of the stories I listen to with you and Wildman, especially Wildman, even on the street, in the houses, and buildings getting blown up, cars getting blown up, and drug fueled parties for 4 days. It's just, man, it's absolutely crazy. And I could do a 4 hour podcast just on you and Wildman, but I only have you for an hour, and I do want to get your thoughts on other things. And there's a question, another question that people don't really ask you is what it takes to be successful from your eyes.
A good reputation, perseverance, workaholicism, building a team of the right people who are honest and trustworthy and loyal. I think if you look at in the stock market, I started out in a penny stock house, and I saw they were burning through their clients. So we photocopied their accounts and moved to a more reliable firm and took a lot of their accounts with us. So our reputation was everything. In the rave scene, the people that were working for the Gravano enterprise, some of them were telling the customers that these pills were from English Shaun, because I had such a good reputation of getting these beige and white presses out of Holland that would use testing kits to make sure it was 100 to 125 milligrams of MDMA. Look at the Gravano enterprise. There was 57 co-defendants. They all agreed to testify right away against the heads of the enterprise. In my enterprise, there was over 100, and only 4 people agreed to testify, which means there was a loyalty and a bond. And, you know, I had one guy that was double dipping. He was getting pills from me and from the Gravano enterprise. And he ended up coming back to me because he said, I provided legal benefits. And, you know, we were more.
You know, you have to weigh up your options. Or if you're in a situation, and Sammy the Bull too. I'm thinking to myself, I've watched Sammy the Bull, right? And he's a crazy cat, right? He's a crazy cat. He definitely has that in him. You can see there's always a play with Sammy. You can, even to this day, you can see there's something. He's always, what's the next step? And everything. He's always 10 steps ahead of somebody. Now, the fact that he denied even knowing you, and it was his son that you were involved, or near involved with. It wasn't him. You weren't involved with Sammy the Bull directly yourself. It was his son. But he even denies knowing you. Do you think that's Sammy the Bull just being Sammy and just having another little crack of the whip, just having something to say on YouTube? Or does he generally not know who you are?
So I've done 2 documentaries with him. He knows who I am now. One of them's already out. It's on National Geographic. It's called How E Busted the Bull. It's Narco Wars. And the other one, I legally cannot say what it is, but a massive film crew just come to my hometown, film me at Wildman's grave, actually, for the first time, film my parents, and it's going to feature, well, I probably shouldn't say, actually, but it's 90 minutes, and it's going to be massive. So he certainly knows who I am now. He said those things at the peak of what's known as the podcast wars, when people were trying to destroy me and destroy my story. And someone threw a question at him, which they didn't put in the clickbait clip that was put out of him denying that he knew me. But just from the way he answered it, I could see that the question was structured in a way to trick him. So, you know, you got Shaun Attwood, this media guy in the UK, you know, saying he's met you and he's done all this with you. How would that register with him when he wasn't running the e-business? That e-business was run by a guy called Mike Papa before the Gravanos came into the scene. Mike Papa brought in Gerard Gravano and Karen Gravano, and it was Gerard who was running things on the streets. And Gerard, the guards actually shackled Gerard to Wildman when he first appeared in Towers Jail just to see what would happen. And that was the first time I'd spoke to him. And because Wildman was looking at me like, do you want me to do him in? I was like, no, let's find out what he knows about his case, because he's running a year or so ahead of us Maybe you can give us some advice. And that's the path we went down with Gerard. I've stayed in touch with Gerard to this day. And he was a champion arm wrestler in the jail. So
Does he
Sammy,
get on with his dad? Does he get on with his dad?
of course, they're really family orientated.
So you speak to the son, and Sammy's not a denier now, but prior to that, what do you think it was? Why was he saying he would have known who you were?
Okay, imagine. Let me put you in his shoes, right? Let's say back in the 1990s, you invested in your son's drug business. You weren't running it at the street level, right? And then 20 years later, someone comes along to you and says, there's a media guy in America by such and such a name saying all these things about you. You'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Bear in mind, no one knew who I was. I was English Shaun, the English family, and Wild Man, Wild Woman. So Shaun Attwood was a name that was never put out there back then. I had so many aliases, the prosecutor said, they couldn't even put them all on my grand jury indictment. So anyway, this new one, the 90-minute one that's coming out, is going to lay these trolls to rest, because they've interviewed the cops on my case. They've interviewed all of the Gravanos, and they're not going to say they don't know who I am, believe me.
See, I completely disagree with anybody being trolled on the internet unless it's factual information. Then it's not trolling, then you're just giving out factual information. And you have been the victim of heavy trolling online, and that's the next topic I want to go into. So being a big character on YouTube and being successful on YouTube, you're coming up to like 800,000 subs, nearly 1 million subs now. That's a massive achievement.
Thanks.
How do you deal with the level of trolling? Like, you're getting trolled from the English side of things to the American side of things. I've seen channels left, right, and center created all around the world criticizing you, getting at you, saying, "Oh, this is fake, that's fake." And as you say, a lot of the stuff is verified, and they won't look at the evidence. Why do you think that is, and how do you deal with that level of troll?
So I think a lot of the channels you're talking about were very small channels, and I probably shouldn't have done it, but I used to wind them up and play with their minds, and it was for my own amusement, and it wasn't impacting my life. But what happened was, the nonsense that those guys were spouting was recycled by people. One person in particular out of Scotland who had hundreds of thousands of followers, who had no followers when I started helping him, and 2 other people that I'd helped, but it was primarily the Scottish podcaster. He repeated those lies to videos that got 2 million views. So I thought, because they were lies, it wouldn't matter. The truth would rule the day. And I was naive that perception is more important than the truth when it comes out with people who are trying to destroy you. So this person, who was making a grab for my subscribers by destroying my reputation, he destroyed his own reputation, because people just started sending me everything on him. But I did a video about this the other day. I had the goods on him, serious goods on him recently, and my ego was expanding because I was going to drop this, and he wouldn't have been able to recover from it. But I went to see a holy man, a Swami, and the Swami said to me, think about everything you're doing in your life. Are you doing it all with love? And that came to the top of my head, and I realized, what was the point of just keeping that going? He tries to destroy my reputation with lies. I respond with the goods on him. He'll just post more lies about me, and it just never ends. And I see people in perpetual YouTube battles destroying each other, and it's not creating anything other than chaos, loss of subscribers, and these people could be concentrating on positive things. It's just so immature and counterproductive. So to answer your question, these trolls were kind of like, they were amusing me with what they were saying, because I knew it wasn't true, and I was playing with the minds a bit, which I shouldn't have done, and I won't do that again.
But you say there are loss of subscribers, but war, just like the Clintons, the war's good for business on YouTube and in real life. That machine, that YouTube machine, needs fed. There's a lot of people would say, "Oh, that whole," and I'm going to move into the YouTube wars now, if you don't mind speaking about it.
Yeah, go for it.
You don't have to mention any names, obviously.
Because they'll take if we mention any names, Ronan, they'll just get this whole video taken down.
Yeah, for obvious
But
reasons.
we can
Yeah.
describe them, in different ways.
Yeah. Listen, I have to say this: both podcasters, I am a massive fan of, and I do not take sides. I think that credit to both guys, and it's not my fight. I'm just here. If it was another person sitting here, I would be asking them the exact same question. So it's not my fight, and I stay out of that because it's so sticky. But what was it like going through that? Because I remember whenever that first kicked off, and I didn't know what to think because I was watching both guys, and I loved both guys. How was it like for that to start off? Did you see it coming? And what was your mental health like going through that?
Okay, so Wildman at that point in time was so ill he couldn't get out of his bedroom, and he was awake for a few days, and then he'd go to sleep for a few days. And it was over that summer I put out a video saying Wildman needs help and hospitalization, because it was the first time I ever heard fear in his voice. So I was extremely concerned about him, and I wasn't in a good frame of mind. I was vulnerable. And it kicked off actually on a podcaster out of Liverpool's channel first. And that was the first shot that was fired in the podcast wars. And I think that was when they were testing the water. And because that video got so many views, all these videos have been taken down for defamation because they lied about me in all of them. If they'd been telling the truth, all these videos would be standing to this day. Because it got so many views, I think that gave the green light then to the Scot to put it on his main channel. Now, he didn't have the balls to say the things himself, but probably what he didn't realize was even by bringing someone on, he was legally liable for publishing the lies, which is what ended up in the lawsuit later on. So he brought Darren on, and Darren, when we made amends, last year and started doing collaborations again, Darren showed me the screenshots from the Scottish podcaster, which I've published on my channel, of him telling Darren I had nasty charges in Arizona of a sexual nature against kids. And those screenshots that he sent to Darren, he sent to my podcast guests. He's tried to tell people not to come on my podcast. Attwood's a P word. Here's the proof of it. And on and on and on and on it went. This is how nasty and evil it got. So there was a conspiracy between the Scottish, the Liverpudlian, and the Southern guy with one eye. And with the Southern guy with one eye, I went on his podcast. It was agreed that I was going to film him and he was going to film me. That was completely agreed in advance, no matter what these people are saying. And I went there to help him. I didn't know I was being set up. I didn't know he was part of the Scottish camp. So I was basically...
Can I just say something, Shaun? And I don't want to get
go for it.
I don't want to get too personal in this here, but looking at that situation for what it was, and not being on YouTube at the time myself, and no, I wasn't on YouTube with the person from London and the Scottish guy, but way at the start you could tell that certain people were being weaponized. I could tell from the offset that Darren was being weaponized. There was, because he's a ferocious character. He's very articulate and he's in a vulnerable situation. And when you've got a guy like that and you get him on your side, regardless of who's right or wrong, if you ever gain support of that person, that's going to be devastating for the opposing side.
It was, because I lost 10,000 subs very rapidly. And I was blessed that True Geordie had scheduled me to go on, I think within days of what the Scottish had pulled. And when I got to go on True Geordie and that video got massive views, it stopped the collapse of the subs, and the subs leveled out. But to this day, I'm still getting death threats from people who watch those videos that 2 million people saw, because he has a social responsibility. If you put videos out to 2 million people, lies, and the defamation lawsuit proved that, and he had to take the videos down. There's always going to be a fraction of people who think you are, doing heinous things to kids. And those people, it just takes one mentally ill person to take matters into their own hand and to take you out. We literally thought my life was in danger and had to take security measures.
Do you think, I don't want to mention names, I don't want to, even if it's, I know you're comfortable with mentioning certain names, but I don't want to be mentioning names just in case it affects anything. But do you think, and I have to be a little bit, I have to criticize you as a fan of your work, because I think I'm not going to sit here and say everything's been great for you. There was a time, and this isn't in my questions, but it's came up into my head now. There was a time with a certain lady on YouTube that you tried to take down trolls. I think that was a moment that, mixed in with everything else, didn't help you.
I completely weaponized the trolls against me. And that was my emotionally immature slip up right there, desensitized. It was a stupid thing to do. It was exacerbated by advice I was given that made things worse. I won't get into that because I'm being threatened with lawsuits over that. And it was a life lesson for me. I did apologize to the people who were offended at the time. And it's a situation I would never, ever repeat. And like I said on the video about True Geordie that I put out yesterday, you know, we're all human. We're all going to make slips from time to time. And that was definitely something I regretted.
I wasn't offended by any stretch of the imagination, but I was a viewer of your stuff, and it was like, wow, what's going on here? And then I did realize, well, look, we're not all perfect, and situations will get to us, and we will try to take down the ones that are trying to take down us for no reason. So, emotional immaturity can sometimes come into it too. Nobody's perfect. Nobody is perfect, and I think that was a recipe for disaster, and then it all came into one, and then obviously there was things that added on to it, and it was just an explosion. It was like a nuclear explosion. I've seen it. But credit to yourself, you came out the other end. You're in a good place now, and you're with a co-host, Jen. And I know I've only got you for an hour here, and we have talked about a good bit in that hour. Jen, so why did you bring in Jen? Was that to sort of freshen up the scene a little bit?
So Wildman had died, and I was looking for someone to fill his boots. And I wanted someone who was a strong character, someone who was a powerful personality. And, I don't have many people in my close circle. And she was someone that I knew who fit that category. And she has been an absolute natural. So I think it was also good that she is a female, because I've got 6 co-hosts right now and only one of them is female. I know my viewers, they used to be 98% male, 2% female, but now since we did conspiracies and who killed E and all that kind of stuff.
That's
The
quite
videos,
strange. Women are into true crime. It's quite strange that women are like serial killers. The vast majority of people who watch serial killer documentaries and true crime is women. So, but I suppose YouTube is a male-dominated platform.
but
But
bear in mind, we were a prison channel from 2007.
yeah.
And prison is a male thing primarily. Until
Yeah.
we diversified, that's when the women started to come in. So huge credit to Jen. She's a force to be reckoned with. I like the yin and the yang energy.
Yeah,
And
she's a fantastic co-host, and she's been recently attacked, and I've watched this, and I commented on your live chat, and I didn't like the way she was targeted. What they were doing to her, I know that could possibly be somebody in her past, but you indicated at maybe possibly somebody that you know together. I'm not going to mention any names. Who's the most likely person who done that to her?
I think it's her stalker, but it was possibly enabled by the London podcaster putting our addresses and phone numbers online. Again, if you put videos out to 2 million people, any lunatic could act. If you put someone's address out, any lunatic can act. So these people, they don't have to be personally responsible. They don't have to show up at their house and smash her window. But if you put someone's address online, that just opens it up for anyone to doing anything. And to, enable that a crime to be committed against a woman is the lowest of the low.
100%. I totally agree with you. You know, women and kids should be kept out of every type of war, psychological, physical. It doesn't need to happen unless it's in their own domain between women themselves. I don't think that should ever happen. And there is a lot of creepy men out there that sort of target women. You're seeing that. My eyes have been open. I'm only on YouTube a year, and the amount of creeps out there left, right, and center is phenomenal. You know, my eyes are just opened. Now, you don't have to comment on this, Shaun, and I'm not putting you under pressure here, but one of your not recent guests, but guests that you've had on over the past year and a half, Decca Higgy, he's come under great scrutiny online, and you know, whatever people believe, I know what I believe, but I don't tell people what to believe. What's your opinion on the whole matter?
My opinion is that people keep trying to drag me into the gutter of that situation. And in Arizona, if you go in the jail and say that guy's a pedo, then the first thing that the gang member says to you is, show me the paperwork. And if the paperwork is shown, that guy is dealt with. If no paperwork is shown, the guy making the accusation is dealt with. So it's a situation that I don't want to get involved in because he's got extremely dangerous trolls. It's just there's no
Do you think
there's no positive energy to be had from this situation for me.
Do you think
it's dark energy?
In regards to paperwork, and I'm just speaking, as I say, you don't have to answer any of these things, and it's just on the paper that I've wrote out. And as I say, you don't have to answer these questions because I understand that it is a situation a lot of people don't want to get involved in. But the paperwork thing, you go to prison, you show your paperwork on this certain individual's paperwork. He is convicted of a sexual offense, and he sort of denied that sexual offense. So I understand that people, if you went into a prison in America, they wouldn't smash you on allegations. But there is allegations out there. You know, there was a Sarah, there was a Clare's Law released. Whether you want to believe that or not, that's fine. I personally believe it myself because, you know, nobody's been arrested over that. If that was said about me, I would get these people arrested. So do you think this is a full trolling campaign, or do you think there's some of these trolls are warranted, or some of these people aren't trolls and they're warranted in what they say?
So I've just completely stopped looking at the situation. It's negative energy. It's counterproductive to my mission, and I don't want anything to do with it. It's the gutter. And other people have asked me, you know, they've tried to drag me into it with various emails and asked me to do videos on it. And my response now to these people is stop trying to drag me into the gutter.
Okay, listen, that's everybody's entitled to that, and I just wanted to get your reaction. And I'm not going to press you any further on that, and that's the way it should be. At the end of the day, you know, pressuring people into speaking about certain situations. I did ask you because he was on your show. You did meet the guy face to face. I never met the guy. I don't know what his whole aura is like. Some people I speak to saying this guy is fantastic. Other people I speak to saying this guy is the worst in the world. But look, it is what it is, and I think people need to have faith in the truth, and there is an element of the gutter to this. A lot of people would say, well, you know, Shaun's talked about the whole Epstein thing, which you've been gagged on. You're not allowed to speak about that. That's why I have never asked you any questions on that. But there is an element to this that it's the gutter. But it's still, though, there's real lives affected in it. And I do think that if anybody can help, if there's any women out there, regardless if it's to do with this guy, that have been through abuse, sexual abuse, domestic abuse, speak up. You know, it's very important to report to the police domestic abuse and sexual abuse because you are an advocate against trafficking.
And this is the thing, the guys that are going after Decca Heggie, if you take Decca Heggie out of the equation, I'm on the same page as them. They are pro women not getting abused. Our mission statement is to end the war on drugs, end mass incarceration, take all that money and go after the predators. We have seen, I've interviewed almost 800 people on the channel, and how many times has a person opened up to us and told us the root cause of their crime was getting molested as a kid, which led to drug addiction, which led to crime. Same trajectory, men, women, over and over again, just different crimes end up in the prison system. And my activism, deconstructing the prison industrial complex, deconstructing mass incarceration and the war on drugs, you're going to look at the root cause of crime, and childhood trauma and paedophilia is a major root cause of crime. Yet these beasts don't get sentenced. They get slaps on the wrist, and they have hundreds of victims. And you watch videos like Sins of My Father, where the church just protects this monster, and it just pisses me off, because I was housed with all these heroin users. People think lock them up, throw away the key. The scumbags, they're out snatching granny's purses, and they're like trolls who lives on the bridges. But when you live with them for 6 years and they tell you they were molested as kids, or they were thrown away, or they've seen their parents die, and these people, you bond with them, it makes you understand what's really going on in the world. And predators are a root cause of crime. And my new book that's coming out for Christmas is called Elite Predators: From Jimmy Savile and Lord Mountbatten to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
But just on, and I'll leave. Will there be links for that? Can I put links in the?
It's not up yet, but it'll be up for Christmas. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you're watching this after Christmas, you can find the links in the description of the video. It's strange though, and I know you need to go, but the Mountbatten thing. Mountbatten was assassinated in Ireland, and I don't know if I heard this from you or from another podcast, that they had a skeleton crew of security on at that time when he was took out by the IRA. So,
I don't know about that. All I know is about the FBI file on him that went back decades. Didn't know what he'd done.
There was a whole thing to do with Mountbatten, and whatever you want to believe about Mountbatten, but there is those links to him and certain things to do with kids. And the day that he was murdered, apparently, he didn't have a full crew of security. It was a skeleton crew of security, and they don't know why. It was like from the get-go that day, it was set up that this guy was to be took out. Crazy stuff.
Yeah. We interviewed Richard Kerr, a brave survivor of the Kincora Boys Home. And you've got this nexus of CIA, MI5, MI6, royal family, politicians justifying honey trap operations involving kids in the interest of national security. So, sick psychopathic monsters that need to be exposed.
Northern Ireland is one of the most corrupt places. Now, it's one of the most beautiful places. You can live here. It's beautiful. There's no madness in the streets. You get a wee bit in Belfast. But see, for the dirty work that's been done throughout the world, in America, England, and throughout the world, a lot of the people coming from Northern Ireland and north of Ireland have been involved in this. And that's an untold story about the north of Ireland. And it's maybe you should get a few guests on from here, Shaun. I would love to see that. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, we're trying to diversify around the country and do more online interviews now.
Yeah. Listen, Shaun, thank you for your time. You're a gentleman for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure to listen to your story and the things that you had to talk about. That is the end of the podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. Have you anything more to say?
No, just huge thank you, Ronan, and congratulations on your success on YouTube and your fair and balanced reporting.
Yes.
You're not hyping things up. You do your research, you get to the bottom of things. And so many people are just making things up for clickbait. And that's why I've come on your channel, because you're not doing that. You're authentic. So power to you, brother.
I try not to sell my soul to the devil and just keep it the way it is.
Yeah, definitely.